So a birth doula is somebody who accompanies a woman and the couple on that journey into inviting a new life into the world. Well, a death doula, one of the ways we show up is doing the same thing, but on the other end. And so we're supporting individuals, families, and sometimes communities towards someone's death. And that could either be, either towards someone's death or once the death has happened and having them try and find their nourishment from the grieving that they're going through.
Welcome to the Spiral Up podcast. I'm your host, Dr. LaChelle Wieme, a peak performance coach and business strategist dedicated to helping you see what's possible within you, the blind spots that are holding you back, and the solutions to ensure success and fulfillment without the hustle. I use my secret sauce of metaphysics, brain science, and scripture to work with God to manifest your ideal life and business. If you're ready to create massive forward momentum in your business and bust through the blocks that drag you down, join me on the Spiral Up journey and create the clarity, confidence, and consistency to become the CEO that lives your life by design. It's time to create the sustainable impact, income, and time freedom you desire faster. Now is the time to spiral up. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Spiral Up podcast. I'm your host, Dr. LaChelle Wieme, and I cannot wait to introduce you to Paul Simard. You guys, he is somebody that is going to give us so much great insight into how to get in touch with ourselves so that we can really live and express, I guess, the greatest versions of ourselves in the life of our dreams. Paul, you are a death doula amongst lots of other really cool things. And I want to just start out by just saying hello, first of all, thanks for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. I love your introduction. It's so good. It's like, who's not ready? Who's not ready?
Right? Let's
They're
do
ready.
it. So, Paul, I want you to give our listeners a chance to get to know you from the top of the mountain view. So tell us a little bit about your company, your business, who you help, how you love to make an impact in the world these days.
Wow. Thank you so much for that invitation. And you're already inviting me into my first edge, which I love. And you don't even realize you're doing it because it's only been probably about 4 months now that everything has actually come under this notion of, or the brand, if you will, of Paul Simard. So paulsimard.co is now actually a thing, which it never was before. But I still do lots of different things, as you mentioned. And so they each do have their own home and they each have their own sort of t-shirt that they get to wear, if you will, allow that sort of metaphor. And my grief work, as you mentioned, I'm a death doula, and that's all done under the brand of the canoe. And I just love the image of the canoe, and I love the invitation that a canoe offers. And I also love sort of the design of it. It's just so simple and just, it's just so beautiful as a way of transporting. And we say that grief is a journey and life is a journey, and so is death. So that's the canoe. And then my work with men is done under sort of living wisdom / humanity. And I work a lot with men, just helping them to come into a more healthy, a more nourishing relationship with their physical, spiritual, and mental well-being. So that's kind of like the work that I do in the world. And they've come to me in ways where they're reflections of my own life, really. That's how I came into contact with them.
I mean, I'm sure that people are probably curious because I've never personally heard of a death doula. And I would love to know a little bit more about what that is, that all encompasses. I think it's going to be an interesting perspective for people listening.
Yeah. Well, I think a lot of your listeners, especially anybody who's navigated alternative ways to bring a life into the world will have heard of a birth doula, right? And so a birth doula is somebody who accompanies a woman and the couple on that journey into inviting a new life into the world. Well, a death doula, one of the ways we show up is doing the same thing, but on the other end. And so we're supporting individuals, families, and sometimes communities towards someone's death. And that could either be, either towards someone's death or once the death has happened and having them try and find their nourishment from the grieving that they're going through. And so I'll accompany somebody who has a terminal diagnosis and is navigating that moment. The other way that a death doula will show up, at least this one that you're talking to today, is to actually gather in community or gather communities to explore the notions of grief, dying, and death, and to, again, wonder about our relationship to these moments and to these experiences in our lives, because
Yeah.
they are so influential. They shape our reality in so many ways, and we're not even aware of it most of the time.
Yeah. And I'm just going to ask, because I think that this is going to lead into the rest of our conversation, but what led you to get into that line of work? Because I'm guessing that you were not like a 17-year-old high schooler who said, someday I'm going to do that. There was something that happened in your life that led you down this path, that you knew that this was part of your purpose. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I'm gonna give you the sort of that 30,000 level view,
Yeah.
and then I'll get into the granulars to get a little bit closer. But
Yeah.
I'm somebody who was always really interested in my own personal well-being, my own personal health. I read the books. Celestine Prophecy was the first one that got me going. The Road Less Traveled, and so on and so forth. But of course, you're reading the books. That doesn't mean you're actually applying the knowledge. So they're not actually shaping your experience. But I've always been curious about those things. And death was also something that I wasn't necessarily afraid of, but more curious about. And also something that I couldn't quite understand why it was something that was being fought off.
Mm,
Why were we always keeping this thing at bay?
right.
And then in 2017, I actually started to get more involved in specifically men's mental health and wellness.
Mhm.
And through that work, I came across a gentleman by the name of Stephen Jenkinson, who has since become my mentor, a teacher, but also, I'm blessed to say, a friend. And Stephen spent most of his life actually as what they call him the angel of death in one of the articles that was written about him, in the grief industry, in the industry of
Yeah.
supporting people. And I just realized that our mental health and wellness is so linked to our relationship to death, to grief, and to, as what Stephen calls, we are largely a grief illiterate culture. In fact, a grief illiterate society, because if we were literate, we would be something that looked more like a culture.
Right.
But the absence of it leaves us in this state of society.
Yeah.
So when I came into Stephen's work in 2019, it just brought everything together, in such a clear way. Because one of the places that men struggle the most with their mental health is around limits. We are confronted by our limits. We are told we are supposed to go beyond our limits, that impossible is nothing, to, take that Adidas commercial. I think it's Adidas.
Yeah.
And instead, and then the ultimate limit being, death, of course, right? And we talk about micro deaths, and I die every night when I go to sleep, but that's not really what's happening here. So when I came into Stephen's work, it slowly drew these two pieces together in a way where it was like, okay, well, what happens if we embrace limits? What happens if we become stoppable? What happens if we actually see death as something that is actually serving and supporting life?
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
I got curious about those things, and then started to introduce that into my work. And now it's just a standalone part of what I do.
It's become who you are and what you do. And I think that, something that you said is going to really tie nicely, I guess, into this next conversation, because in 2017, something very pivotal happened to you.
Yeah.
And I think that when you've shared that with me, and when you're going to share this with us, it really ties into the fact that death and grief are things that are uncomfortable and are absent from our culture because we avoid it, we resist it, we don't want to talk about it. So tell us kind of a turning point that happened to you in 2017 that you really feel like could be relatable to many of the people here that are listening when it comes to your job.
I mean, I think it'll be relatable, and I hope it's not relatable to too many, because it's not an
Right.
experience that I want people to actually go through.
Yeah.
But we will all be shaped by this kind of experience in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for calling it in. In 2017, I held a very senior position within a public institution here in Montreal. And I walked into my boss's office thinking that I was laying out the plan for the year ahead. And I had my strategic plan all laid out. And instead, the strategic plan got set aside. And I was basically told I no longer had a job. And the whole meeting lasted 7 minutes and was done in a very sterile way. There was very little humanity, to be quite
Yeah.
frank, in that conversation. And the absence of that put into stark contrast the fact that everything that I was holding on as my definition of myself within my family as a protector and a provider had just been stripped away.
Yeah.
I was suddenly no longer the protector or the provider as defined by the societal norms in which I was raised.
Right.
Right. And because of that experience,
Mhm.
the thing that came right in the door at the same time was guilt and shame. And that guilt and shame is the thing that kept me from doing the thing that you're pointing to, which is to say, sitting in the discomfort, grieving the experience, grieving the job, and sitting in the learning that was available to me. Instead, I actually kept it bottled in. And I told probably about, I would say there was 5 to 10 people who knew, none of whom were my really close inner circle. That is to say, my family. Didn't tell my family for 3 weeks. And I didn't tell a lot of my really close friends for about that same amount of time, mostly because I felt as if I didn't, in fact, present this loss with a plan of how to get over it, that I was going to be seen as less than, that I was going to be seen as inadequate, that I was going to officially lose my place as a protector and a provider.
So you literally like showed up, like pretended like you were going to work.
I got my bag, I put it, my
Yeah.
bag on my shoulder, and I left every day, and I spent my time in coffee shops until I had someone who was a friend, but not to the depth that I realized until I did this.
Yeah.
Until I shared with him, and then he said, no, you're not going to coffee shops and libraries. We're going to get you a seat in our office. We're going to get you a place to do the work. You're going to be a part of the team, and so on and so forth. And that's actually when I began to have some space to accept what was happening.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Where I was being invited to lean in on someone else as opposed to trying to figure it all out on my own, which is a narrative I think we all get. And that's something that, yes, is attributed to men a lot, but I think more and more over the last 15, 20 years, everyone has been told that you need to be sovereign, that you need to be independent, that you need to be able to stand on your own 2 feet.
Yes.
And my experience is that doesn't really serve.
Right. And that's, that experience with you unexpectedly losing your job and not wanting to have to face the emotions and face the identity shifting and having to have hard conversations with people that you loved. Instead, you essentially pretended that it didn't exist. You shoved it down. You didn't allow yourself to process it. And it's really cool because now what you're doing is you're helping people to be able to face hard feelings, to be able to process things instead of just pretending that they don't exist. And I think that it's not just a masculine thing. It's that all of us have the ideas of what life is supposed to look like, what our businesses are supposed to look like. And when we fall short of what we think that we're supposed to be or who we're supposed to be, we allow shame and guilt to come in. We feel like it's going to create this perception of weakness, right? And so we hide parts of ourselves instead of allowing those pieces to be seen, to be explored, to be felt. And I would love to just give you the floor and have you talk about the impact that holding that stuff in can have and the power that can come from actually allowing it to be faced and explored.
Thank you so much. First of all, you summarized that so beautifully, which is what you do. That's why you're the host, right? So thank you for that. And I love doing that. So I also appreciate when I see the talent of it. So thank you.
Yeah.
We talked about this sort of off camera before we started or before recording.
Yeah.
And, when we don't sit in those things, that's when the spiral down becomes something that can consume us, right? When they become these heavy layers that we continue to add on to ourselves because the danger with shame is and the power of shame, right? And I don't mean necessarily or the force of shame because it's not a nourishing thing, is that it is very easy to add layers. Once we start to get into the shame game, we find all kinds of ways to make that thing heavier and heavier. And so the spiral down becomes something that is not only accelerated, but it's deepened. And those, we've all heard this before, right? Emotions are energy in motion. They
Yes.
absolutely are. I don't dispute that. They need to be in motion, but motion can also be down.
Yes.
And they will continue to take us in that direction as long as we don't address the other part of emotions, which is that emotions are questions. I believe emotions are questions. Those emotions are asking something of you. They're trying to show you something. They want you to learn something. And if we don't take the time to sit with them and be curious about them, not just what is it that I'm actually feeling, but where am I feeling it? Why am I feeling it? What is the story around the feeling? When we don't do those things, now we get into this thing called depression, right? We have
Yes.
the experience of depression
Yeah.
because we can no longer imagine anything different.
Right.
So our imagination is that this is limited to this. This is just what's happening. This is the thing. I'm feeling these things. This is who I am. I suck. I'm a failure. I'm no good. And all the evidence is showing me otherwise. But we also talked about the fact how that imagination that's brought us there can also take us somewhere else. And I like to start with, was there ever a time when this wasn't your experience? And the moment, for most people, there was. And it usually wasn't that far ago. You don't have to go too far back in time to come to that moment. So the imagining of that tells you that no, in fact, this isn't always the case. And we can then spend some time in that place. I'm not someone who believes we should let our past go. I believe that our past is our greatest teacher, and they're also our greatest support system. So let's go back into the past and find that place and remember it in our body that there was a time that there was a different experience for us. And then our imagination can continue to feed and nourish. And now all of a sudden that spiral down slows.
Yeah.
And maybe it starts to go horizontally, and then we can start to imagine something different. Our imagination is a superpower. It really is. And my favorite definition of non-clinical depression, let me just state that, comes from the same gentleman. Unfortunately, people who spend enough time with me start to understand that Stephen Jenkinson has had a huge influence on my life.
Yes.
But his definition of depression, non-clinical in nature, is my favorite. The experience of depression is a collapse of the imagination that things could be any other way.
I love that so much. There's so much that I want to unpack in that, if that's okay. And one of the things that I teach inside of all of my programs, and as well as on the show, is using the emotional vibrational scale and recognizing that our body, as emotion, as energy in motion, right, is literally vibrating at specific frequencies based on the feelings that I have. And as I lean into those emotions of disempowerment down to the shame and the guilt, I'm actually lowering the frequency of my body versus allowing it to spiral up, right, to the higher frequencies of my body. Yeah. When we don't acknowledge some of those feelings and we allow that frequency to stay stuck, it actually gets stuck in our body as watered up balls of energy, right? Mm-hmm. And so when we allow for that heaviness of those watered up balls of energy to stay in our body, it can hold us back, it can slow us down. And so not acknowledging them, not feeling them, not exploring them, not allowing them to shift us into that imagination is what creates the blocks. It's what creates the heaviness. Mm-hmm. It's what creates the, I want to do this, but I just can't get myself to do it because it's bumping up against a block in our body of watered up balls of energy. Yeah. And I think that it's that acknowledgement that the more that you think that you're doing yourself a favor by ignoring it, the more you're just adding on layers, as you mentioned, of unprocessed watered up balls of energy that are going to slow you down and hold you back. Yeah. I also think that, what you mentioned is so powerful in the sense of the imagination and how we allow this self-talk and the layers that can happen when we go unchecked, I guess. And our brain, you guys, is wired for efficiency, and our reticular activating system is always going to look for evidence in the outside world to validate and justify its internal worldview. So if you believe that you suck because you lost your job, or you believe that life is hard because this happened you're going to continue to find things in your memory bank. You're going to continue to find things in the outside world to validate that. And you're going to continue to energize that spiral down, right? But what you said was so powerful, because if you are always ignoring and pushing down and pretending that things don't exist, pretending that grief doesn't exist, pretending that the job loss didn't exist, pretending that this didn't happen, not only are you allowing yourself to stay stuck in that watered up ball of energy situation, but you're missing the opportunities for the imagination. And it's like, I always believe that everything's perfectly perfect, that life happens for us.
Mm-hmm.
And so what you're saying, and how I interpreting it, Paul, is that you get to choose. Are you going to choose to either keep ignoring it and letting it run under the surface and continue to sabotage you silently? Are you going to choose to feed into the negative self-talk and all the things that prove to yourself why you suck? Or are you going to choose to say, I'm going to take this as the opportunity, as the catalyst, as the opportunity to use my imagination to say, if this never happened, I wouldn't be forced to look for other opportunities and other possibilities. Thank you, experience, for being the catalyst for me to be able to shift my perspective and then look for new possibilities, allow my imagination to show me opportunities that are out there that I never would have looked for or been open to if I hadn't been in the situation or had to experience the situation.
I mean, can we just get a hell yes? Like, seriously. And one of the things that I think is so important in there's one word, when I hear that word, I get so excited, but you said the word get, right?
Yes.
And it's really, really, really important. I think that the listeners hear this part, right? Mm-hmm. Because the moment that anything feels like should or need, you're setting yourself up again.
Yep.
Because the should and the need, first of all, if you were to listen to those energies, those almost never are born from your own sense of desire for yourself. Shoulds and needs almost always come from outside. My dad said I should. My mom said I need to. Society says I have to. All of those things usually come from someone else.
Yeah. And they feel disempowered too, right? Like you're giving away your power to something outside of you.
And then you're going to measure yourself up against what they think that should look like.
Right. Yes.
It's the prime setup for another shame cycle to come, right?
You're
just timing totally. The next shame cycle. Like, oh, look, there it is, right over there down the highway. I can see it.
Right.
Why? Because the shoulds, the needs, and the have tos.
Right.
When you come from a place of get to, you're doing two things. One, you're empowering yourself, which you spoke to. But two, you're also acknowledging the experience that you're coming from as being in service. That experience was in service to something. Can we also take a moment not just to grieve that, but to express gratitude towards it? Because talking about your different levels of frequency, we also know that gratitude is one of the highest levels of frequency.
Absolutely. Amen to that.
Up there, right?
Yes.
So this crappy, terrible moment of losing my job, of getting a divorce, of whatever it is, and I'm going to take it one step further and say, having had someone I love die, can I find the gratitude in that? Because let me speak to that last one so that people can understand that this isn't just talk. But if your grief is so profound, is so complete, and I should give people my definition of grief, but I'll do that in a minute, maybe.
Yeah.
But like, if that grief is so deep, is so profound, is so all-consuming, it's because the love was too. And we know we should be grateful for that love, but we're so consumed by this thing that is defined as a negative experience, grief, which it actually isn't, but that we lose sight of the gratitude. Like, my father is still grieving my mother's death in 2022, and he's going to grieve her death for the rest of his life. Why is that? Because he's still loving her. He still loves her.
Yes.
And how many of us would, most people here don't know the love my parents shared, but I can tell you that if you did, that's the kind of love you would want for yourself.
Yeah.
Right? So my father's grief is a get to. He gets to grieve my mother's death with such depth because of the love. And it's the same thing with all the other things we talked about.
Yeah. Paul, one of the things that I find that people sometimes look at me like I have three eyes is like, you're expecting me to go down here at the bottom of my sorrow. Like, you don't understand, right? And then you want me to hop up here to say thank you for this experience. Like, that's crap. Like, I can't. And one of the things that I found that has been really helpful for me and for others that I work with is getting to neutral first. And neutral is really just this acknowledgement that it's not good or bad. It just is. And
Neutral's not apathy.
no, it's just this
Not indifference.
acceptance. It's an acceptance of, okay, this just happened.
Yeah.
Now what?
Yeah.
And I get to choose once I can either keep choosing to be victim to it, spiraling down, or I get to choose how do I want to bring myself back up to get closer to where that thankfulness is. But it's that acknowledgement that, okay, this happened.
Yeah.
Not good or bad, it just is. Now what can I do? Do you find that is something that has helped you and the clients that you work with as well?
Absolutely. I mean, my first invitation when I'm working with clients on either side is let's again use the example of someone with a terminal illness. We're not going to sugarcoat things. We're going to work together to sit in the terminal illness. It's only when you allow that terminal illness to be a part of your experience that you can then be whole as you're navigating it. Until such time, you will stay in that fight energy.
Can you explain that a little bit more to us? Like, give us another layer to that.
Yeah. I mean, the ultimate example, of course, and my mom died from cancer too, but like, just think of the narrative around cancer. It's always fight, right? We're always trying to fight cancer.
Right.
Very few people are invited to actually live with cancer. Now, living with cancer doesn't mean that you let the treatments go, that you stop doing the things that could support some sort of recovery. That's not it. But your energy, fight versus live with, is very, very different. The fight keeps you in that lower limbic brain. It's trying to keep you safe, right? It's trying to protect things. You're actually going to invite more stress and anxiety into your body with a fight energy. Right? And there is a moment for fight. I'm not sure that it's there in the moments of terminal disease. So when you come to a place, and I'm talking about terminal disease, let's be very, very clear here, right? Because that's when people invite me into the room. That's when I get called into service. Is at the terminal stage. So there's no hiding from it. And so how can we make that a part of your experience? And again, I love to speak from my own experience and what I had the gift of witnessing. And I don't want to speak about my clients, so I'm going to speak about my mom.
Okay.
And the moment that my mom, and I was in the room when she did it, I could see it when she put the sword down and said, no more doctors. We had been to like 6 doctors in like 2 months, and everybody said the same thing. I can't, but I know someone who may be able to. Okay. But none of it was going to be bring you back to health or extend your life. And when my mom put the sword down, that's when she accepted the whole experience into her life. And I'm going to tell you, and it's not for this moment, but one of my favorite things to talk about in my life, other than my children and my daughters specifically, is my mother's dying, because it was so beautiful. Her dying was very much a part of her life for those last 5 months.
Yeah.
Before she died. And it was her allowing it to come in and to be a part of the experience.
Right. It wasn't a denial of anything. It was a full acceptance of all pieces.
Yes.
That she gets to have this probably the fear of what's happening and the pain of what she was experiencing, and full expression of joy and peace and family and all the things. So it was allowing for all the things to come in.
Exactly. And we all grieved. We all got to grieve together. For 5 months, we got to grieve my mother's dying together. And it's like, that's a gift that you just can't bring with.
You know, and I think, there might be listeners, Paul, that are, in this experience right now. And I think that I want to just thank you for helping them to see how they can navigate this life experience and know that they have to go on with their life and do the things that they have to do and show up for their businesses and show up for their families and do the things as they're navigating this. And that it doesn't mean that they're choosing this or this. They're allowing both to be present at the same time.
Yeah. And especially for all of the entrepreneurs that are out there, like, it's really, really important. I understand why people say, you need to put things in buckets and things like that. But that's also a denial of the human body and what it is and how it operates, right? You cannot walk into your place of business and somehow cut out the part of you that is a caretaker at home for your parent with a terminal disease. It's just not possible. And when we try to do that, we don't allow that part of us to also go into the workspace. That's when we get ourselves into the position where we're going to be potentially not acting in healthy ways amongst our employees, our team members, our clients. We're not going to be like, that's how we don't show up for the people who need us most in the way they need us in that time.
And
so allow it all to walk through the door all the time.
I want to explore that a little bit. And I want to just like bring into this concept, this application of this concept to people that maybe aren't experiencing this particular situation, but maybe find yourself in this rat race, this hamster wheel of pushing. I got to get through this next launch. I got to get through this next sale. I got to get through this next thing. And you find yourself in this fight. I got to fight to get this done. I got to fight to prove this to myself. And meanwhile, you're allowing this all or nothing thinking to keep you from enjoying your kids growing up, enjoying the sale that you just made, because you're so much fighting for the next one that you're not enjoying the one that you just had. And there's this like black or white, all or nothing boxes that we put ourselves in that oftentimes is the reason why we feel the pressure constantly and the fear constantly and the heaviness constantly, where we're not saying that there isn't some pressure. We're saying that it coexists with joy, and allowing ourselves to not only acknowledge it, but also acknowledge the good stuff and allow them to coexist at the same time. And so I think that there's lots of different ways that we can apply the wisdom that you're bringing to us today. And I would love to just know from your perspective, Paul, if there's any additional practical tools that we can do to allow ourselves to embrace all of the pieces of our lives and fully allow each one to be seen and felt and honored as we navigate and go through the things, because our lives are not in buckets. They're complex with lots of different players vying for our attention at any given moment.
That's right. It's yes to all of that again. I mean, you're talking really right now to one of the things that I focus a lot of times teaching men in particular, which is the skill of becoming stoppable. Becoming stoppable does not mean you stop.
Okay.
That's not what it means. Becoming stoppable means you open up the aperture of your camera if you want. That's one metaphor you can use. And what happens when you open up the aperture of a camera? It takes more in. There's more light that comes in. There's more vibrancy that comes in. You're able to get a fuller, right, experience of the thing. The other example, and this one is especially true for entrepreneurs, is I use the example of a speeding car, right? The faster that you go in a speeding car, the narrower your peripheral vision is. And you talked about the experiences with kids and more joy and those things. All of those things, when you're at a high speed in your entrepreneurship adventure, those things are no more than like pixels in your peripheral vision. And it's one thing to miss the joy of your children's lives, and you don't want to do that, and you don't want to miss it for yourself either. But there's other things that you'll also miss. You might miss some cries for help from those people as well, right? You might miss some cries for help from your own body. Sorry. And so the skill of becoming stoppable is, for me anyways, and the way that when I work with my clients, is making sure that we take moments during our day to check in with ourselves, to check in with our nervous system, to understand where we store things in our bodies. I'm someone, and this is just my experience, and it comes from me learning it, right? So I know when I'm on sort of high adrenaline, when my feet are not flat on the floor. I'm a legs person. I was a fast runner as a kid. I was small, so I also needed to escape bullies and things like that. But like that continues to this day, right? So my primary nervous system response that I know is trying to tell me something is in my legs, right? And so when I can see that, when I bring awareness to that, I can take a moment and I can just feel what it's like to put my heels back on the floor. I'm sure your listeners, given the fact that they're listening to you, have heard about the vagal nerve. And it's one of the primary places where we can actually just bring some ease back into our bodies by paying a little bit of attention to it.
Yeah.
Right.
Absolutely.
So one of my favorites is just taking that, let's say in this case, it's my right arm to the base of the left side of my neck, and just allowing it to come down the side of my body and sending a signal. And even in my mind while I'm doing it, like, I'm safe in this moment. There's nothing I need to do. You do that 3 times on either side, and you've just sent a signal to your vagus nerve that it can ease. You can do the same thing if you're sitting down, from the crux of your hips towards your knees, pressing. This is the one I do, right? So I actually use fists, and I go from my hips to my knees, not too hard, but I just send that down and I let my feet actually like come to the ground and releasing. But it's just, there's so many little things that we can do for ourselves just to invite that moment, not to stop, not to be stopped, to be stoppable. That puts you back in the driver's seat. I'm not asking you to get into the passenger seat. I'm asking you to get in the driver's seat, but to be in control of what's happening.
Yeah. I remember you mentioning that when you lost your job and were afraid to tell anybody. It's like you told yourself, I have to man up. I have to push through this. Yeah. And I think that oftentimes we're afraid to allow ourselves to be stoppable, or too afraid to acknowledge some of those painful feelings because we're afraid we're going to stay stuck there.
Yeah.
100%. And that's what I think that when you brought in those tools, help us bring ourselves back to that awareness, back to that neutral place.
Yeah.
And then using that camera analogy to, when we allow for the aperture to let more in, it's not just all the negative things, but it's the positive things. What else can I be grateful for today?
Yeah.
And allow ourselves to experience all of it, and bring in those tools, like you mentioned, to regulate our nervous system, to get ourselves kind of neutral. And then once we're neutral, then we can choose what direction we want to go, up this spiral or down this spiral, right?
Yeah. I mean, just because you alluded to that sort of dark spiral again, one thing too that I think is really, really helpful, and I did this for a long time, and I want to give credit. I'm always about giving credit where credit is due. Don't worry, this isn't going to be Stephen Jenkinson, but I had about 7 or 8 years ago, I was working with a coach. His name is Brian Grasso, who's absolutely brilliant. And Brian gave me this practice of 3 wins, right? 3 wins at the end of the day.
Yep.
And he was really helping me through a really, really hard time. And he actually made it into my TED Talk, even without me specifically naming him, but he's referenced. And one of the things that Brian had me do was, at the end of every day, just list 3 wins. And at the beginning, I did what I think many people would do, and certainly men. I was trying to look for those wins that society would identify as wins.
Yes.
And he invited me to come back in and say, Paul, we're going to do this instead. Paul, did you make your own cup of coffee today? I was like, yeah. He's like, that's a win. Paul, did you pick up your daughter from school today? Yeah, of course. That's a win, right? And understanding that even when we're in our dark moments, we're actually doing things that are wins, right? And it's so simple, and it sounds so silly, but it rewires the brain, and it takes it in the direction of something other than that shame and guilt. It's like, no, because there are people, and if you're one of them, imagine something different for yourself. Is the starting point and the message we're sending to you today.
Yes.
But there are some people today, when it comes to that time of going to pick up their child at the end of the day, they're in such a place they can't do it.
Right.
So if you're in that place and you did, it's a win.
100%. And you're showing yourself what's possible. You're showing yourself that you are capable. You're building those muscles to continue to show yourself what you're capable of. This is amazing. I am so grateful that we got a chance to talk about this and to share just how practical this can be. And it doesn't matter if you're in the middle of something really big, like a terminal illness or a death, or if you're just stuck in loops where you're afraid to kind of see and explore lots of different things. Paul, this has been so wonderful for myself and the listeners to be able to learn from your wisdom. And I want to thank you for sharing that. Is there anything that we haven't had a chance to discuss today that you really want to make sure that we acknowledge?
I want to actually acknowledge two things. One is that it's not a competition, and it never was. It never was a competition. So life is a game, but there's no score.
Right.
The body keeps the score.
Yes.
Life doesn't.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
So put the winning energy down. You're already winning. That's the first thing. And then the second thing is just I think it's really important to acknowledge people like yourself who are creating spaces for people to come and to be able to expose to these things. Because one of the things we have stopped doing as a society, in my experience, is gathering around the fire and having these kinds of conversations. And podcasts are an opportunity, again, even though we will probably never meet all of the people who are listening right now, we are gathered around a fire and we are having a conversation like our ancestors did in order to serve and support our own capacity to live and to thrive more fully. So thank you for building the fire and by inviting people to gather around. And it's been a pleasure to be doing that with you today.
I love that. And we're going to make sure that we have all of your information in the show notes so that people know how to find you. And I'm going to ask, though, before we wrap up this conversation, tell us a little bit about what your TED Talk is about.
So the one that I did do was about my own journey with mental health and wellness and masculinity, right? So it's actually called the Mythical Male. And it's me speaking to the fact that so many of the ways that I had been trying to articulate myself in the world was based on other people's perceptions of what a real man, a real father, a real husband should be. And when I didn't live up to those, enter shame, guilt, failure, et cetera, right? And then I'm really excited because I've been invited to do another TED Talk later this year, actually in 2 months. That's going to be, the working title right now is Bringing Death Back to Life.
Amazing.
So I'm very excited to be doing that too.
And this is wonderful. And I think that there's so much wisdom that can be gathered from both of those beautiful expressions. So thank you for sharing that. You guys, I hope that you enjoyed this as much as I did, and we would love to hear from you. So know that this podcast is meant to be a community. And so if there was something that really spoke to you, we want to hear from you. So reply back in our stories, leave a review, let us know that you're out there and listening, because it's so much fun to know that the things that we share are actually making a difference. And Paul, I wanted to thank you again. And you guys, thanks for listening, and I'll see you next time. Bye, everybody.
Thank you
so much for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe and leave a review. Each honest review helps me spiral up so that I can serve you even better. Whether you're feeling a lack of impact, income, or time freedom, or perhaps you're just ready for massive momentum in your business, let's chat. Apply for a call so that you can gain clarity, identify what's holding you back, and make a plan to spiral up. Head on over to iam-lifebydesign.com/breakthrough or access the link in the show notes. For immediate support, plug into our community, the Better Club. We focus on inspiration, tactical guidance, and support. This is a community that wants to be better, do better, and have better in life and in business, and we're going to help you do the same. Let's spiral up, friends.